God, the Creator who existed in the void and out of nothing created something. First, a spark, light and dark. Then a wind, oceans and skies, bodies of land, mountain valleys, vegetation, creepy crawlies, and winged birds of the skies. Animals that leapt, pawed, clawed, and jumped, running at great speeds, and eventually some who even got up and walked. The great Creator created. Now, I don't know if it all happened as a spark or a bang or a silent splitting cell. I don't know. But I do know that seeing God as Creator is one of the lenses that we use to capture an understanding of what or who we think God is. So we understand God as Creator, and then, of course, the Creator created this world and all in it, which we often refer to as creation. But we also might imagine that innate in the Creator's creation is this divine imprint, and also a gift, the ability to create as well. Whether that's to procreate, be it offspring or even vegetation, or simply to create something new out of something old, using resources to innovate that which was not previously there. We mirror the Creator in our creations, and maybe we even thread that divine essence into our creations because we ourselves were created from the initial divine Creator who first created us, all of creation. So, quite obviously, today we are celebrating creativity, and we're celebrating it through word and song and artistry. As I've already said, our creativity fair is going to feature all of the creative things that our local creators have created. But I think it's a great time for us to think about the essence of creativity and how we understand God in relationship to it and us. Julia Cameron, you might remember her name, she wrote The Artist's Way, a spiritual path to higher creativity. And she says, the heart of creativity is an experience of the mystical union. The heart of the mystical union is an experience of creativity. I like that. The very act of being creative connects us with God in what she says is mystical union with the divine. There's something holy about creativity, something holy about being a part of the creative process. She says, creativity occurs in the moment, and in the moment, we are timeless. It's really rather mystical, isn't it? But I think she's right, because I personally know from experience that there have been times when I am writing, maybe even creating a sermon, where I feel I just become the vessel. And the muses just use me as a means to get words on paper or screen, and they just flow out of me. I'm completely in sync, unaware of time or even my own thoughts. It just flows. I'm in the flow. It sounds very Taoist, doesn't it? But I think it's true. To be part of the way is very much how she would understand the artist's way, being in sync. A synchronicity that is about being present in a moment of time, but also beyond time. There's a timelessness to creativity. Of course, I also want to note that I have very much been a part of the creative struggle, and that takes time. Sometimes it's magic, but other times it is work. And I'm very aware of how much time I put into creating and even how difficult it can be. So no, creating isn't always magic. It can take a lot of effort and time and sometimes even frustration. To create a work, you do work. Effortless creation is a beautiful thing, but the hard-fought struggle to create is too. Now, Julia Cameron seems to think that we slog through it when we let the difficulty of creation become a duty, rather than focus on the delight of creating, that there is fun in it. She says, do not think duty. Do not do what you should do, spiritual sit-ups like reading a dull but recommended critical text. Do what intrigues you. Explore what interests you. Think mystery, not mastery. She says, we must remain ready to ask, open-minded enough to be led, and willing to believe despite our bouts of disbelief. Creativity is an act of faith, and we must be faithful to that faith, willing to share it to help others and to be helped in return. Creativity is an act of faith. I like this too. In many ways, I resonate. I used to always worry about having a sermon every single week. But I have found a sense of faith that the creativity will come. It won't always be a masterpiece. Sorry, guys. But it is an act of faith that if I show up, somehow a sermon will too. So I could leave now, but we're gonna show up. We're here. Now, what if we push this even further? What if creativity is not just an act of faith? What if creativity is divine? What if it is the divine? Well, we traditionally think of God as the creator and that we are a part of the creation. We become mirrors of God, creators ourselves, in the image of God, we like to say. Interestingly, process theology suggests a different way of seeing God in creation. Rather than seeing God as the creator, God becomes creativity itself. God is the essence, not necessarily the entity. Now, we likely have some varying levels of familiarity with process theology here at IUCC. So, in a nutshell, here's a brief explanation. Process theology came largely from the work of Alfred Whitehead, process philosophy. So you'll often hear them talking about Whiteheadian theology, Whiteheadian process, Whiteheadian philosophy. But it's all grounded in this idea that everything is in process. Everything evolves. So theologically, it teaches that everything that exists, including God, is in an eternal process of growing and becoming, which you might note is theologically seemingly in opposition to the unmoved mover, right? This understanding of God. We've all heard it and we've maybe even said it, that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Well, this theology embraces a God that is not the same. Rather, a God that is affected by time and experience, not simply timeless, but affected by creation itself. A God that is in relationship. A God that is creating, divine in process. God is not stagnant. And because process theology sees God in relationship, so too does process theology see the influence of the divine relationship in creation. So in process theology, we often talk about co-creation. You even heard Terry say it in her prayer. Either humanity or creation itself, say the earth or the animals, the trees, all of us, we play active roles in the creation process. God doesn't do it alone, but very importantly, neither do we. So gone are the Calvinist predestination, predetermination worldviews, this puppeteer that manipulates all things, in control, directing the scenes. This theology illustrates our power, our ability to play a role in our future for good or for bad. Next week, we're going to observe Earth Sunday, and it almost goes without saying that we're going to have to look at the very negative effects of our actions. But by embracing process perspectives, we also recognize that we do play a role, and we can play a role to create a different future for our lives and for that of ongoing creation. There's always a possibility for change. There's always a possibility that we will grow beyond our current present. And I don't know about you, but I find comfort in this. I know change is scary, but it's comforting in a way too, right? Process theologian John Cobb is the resident expert. He's now a professor emeritus at Claremont School of Theology. And his work and those who worked with him at the Center for Process Theology, their work focuses on this idea of becoming over substance. So we're becoming. Well, Ecclesiastes might have claimed there's nothing new under the sun. Process theology actually embraces the new because creation isn't done. Robert Messel wrote a book entitled Process Theology, and he outlined 3 theological aspects that are important. 1, there is a relational character to the divine which allows God to experience both the joy and the suffering of humanity. So God suffers just as those who experience oppression, and God seeks to actualize all positive and beautiful potentials. God must therefore be in solidarity with the oppressed and must also work for their liberation. That's how process theology and liberation theology merge together. Number 2, he says, God is not omnipotent in the classical sense. And so God does not provide support for the status quo, but rather seeks the actualization of the greater good. And number 3, he says, God exercises a relational power and not a unilateral control. In this way, God cannot instantly end evil and oppression in this world. God works in relational ways to help guide persons to liberation. So, innate in process theology is this idea that God needs us too, right? Not just humanity, maybe all of creation. That God moves us towards a goodness, that the essence of the divine is to manifest a greater good. But God needs creation because God's in relationship. God needs us to do this. God is in the experience and thus experiences the suffering and the joy in solidarity. Even the idea of Christ in creation is the embodiment of God in solidarity. God is in this with us. We are not so very separate. So if we return to this Whiteheadian idea that God is creativity, the essence rather than the other, and we add this to the words of the artist Julia Cameron's musings on creativity, that the heart of creativity is an experience of the mystical union, and the heart of the mystical union is an experience of creativity, we see how the divine is acting in creating in us. So then, intentional co-creation becomes important, creating towards the good, whether that's creating beauty in or out of the chaos or pain or the suffering, creating avenues for peace amidst violence and war, working to create a world that is safer, healthier, cleaner, freer. We co-create in our present moment and co-creating into our future, not because we are more powerful than God, but because God is the very essence of creativity that powers all of our creative abilities. Now, if that's pretty heady for you, let me just take it to real life present. Throughout our service, we have witnessed these artists creating. Have you noticed that Jenna's over here with Kadeem? I thought their presence in the context of our worship was important. Not just their work, their product, but the very fact that they are creating. They illustrate the action. As they create, they are creating, and they're influenced by the world around them, by you, by your presence, by the music, and our prayers and our scripture. Maybe even my words, I don't know. But they aren't doing this alone. They're co-creating with each other. Their actions, their color, their design, each playing off the other, influenced by one another. Their own individual hand, their own mind, their own artistic expressions, but they're each in relationship with the other, creating something beautiful together, sparked perhaps by that divine creativity. It's divine. It's powerful. All of this is creativity in action. God in color. God in us. So rest in this. Creativity is in us. Amen.